You don't need to spend $50,000 and 15 years to learn guitar, because I've already done it for you. I even moved to a different country and took up a massive student loan to get a fancy music degree. And after spending all of this money, I know exactly what works on guitar. So in this video, I'll share the 5 biggest lessons that completely changed my playing. And you don't even have to pay me $50,000, unless you want to, of course. Life is short, so let's get straight into lesson 1. One of the hardest things to improve on guitar is technique. But bad technique is also why many guitar players stop improving. So it's important. To fix this, I like to add in a daily routine with something I call general technique exercises. These are amazing because you can do them for only 5 minutes a day, very slowly, and you will improve. One amazing exercise is called the spider, which is a classic, but for a good reason. So I'll first play through the exercise, and then I'll give you some tips to play it correctly. So here's the spider. When you play this exercise, you don't want to use the flat part of your fingers, but instead you want to use your fingertips. And to make that easier, you should have some angle on your fingers. So not like this, but more like this. So almost like a spider, actually. You also want to let the notes ring as long as possible. So not like this. But instead, you want to play like this. When you do this exercise correctly, it's surprisingly hard, but it's also really good just for your overall technique. So try to do this just 5 minutes a day, and you will see improvements. Next, let's have a look at lesson 2. Learning guitar is a bit like climbing steps. If you miss one step, it's going to be really hard. But if you have the step, the next step is going to be so much easier. Most guitar players have loads of gaps in their playing, usually because they don't know what to practice in the first place. But when you go to a university, they have a very specific plan. They know exactly what you're going to do for the next 3 years, and they have a plan for every single week. However, most people just play guitar and then hope for the best, but it's really hard to go somewhere if you don't know where you're going. To figure out exactly what to practice, I like to divide guitar into a few different main skills. The most important ones are chords, technique, scales, arpeggios, learning songs, improvisation, oral skills, and musicality. Then you can divide all of these skills into smaller sub-skills, and I've already done that for you. I've created a roadmap with all guitar skills to learn in order, from complete beginner to pro. You can get it for free, the link is in the description. Time for lesson 3. And this is honestly a huge game changer. But still, people aren't really talking about this. If you haven't already, get yourself something nice to drink, because this is a good one. For this, I'm going to assume that you know the 5 shapes of the pentatonic scale. And maybe you learn the pentatonic scale in one key, so you get really good at that one key. But when you have to change the key, then it gets very messy and you have to move all the shapes, and it's just very hard. So now I'll show you the concept that gave me total fretboard freedom. And I call it anchoring. It's similar to caged, which you might have heard of, but just better. Let's use anchoring on a pentatonic scale. Step 1 is to find the root note on the 2 lowest strings. And since we're playing the A minor pentatonic, the root note is A. Let's look at the root note on the low E string first, which is going to be the 5th fret of the low E string. From this root note, you always have shape 1 on the right side of the root note. And and shape 5 on the left side of the root note. So we're using a root note as our anchor. This means if you find the root note on the lowest string, you always know you can play shape 1 and 5 from this root note. Always. Next, let's go to the root note on the A string. From here, you can always play shape 4 on the right side of the root note. And even though the shape doesn't start on the A string, we always think about the shape in relation to the root note. And then we have shape 3 on the left side of the root note. So if you know the root note on the A string, you always know where to play shape 3 and 4. So far, we have covered the root notes on the 2 lowest strings. And from each root note, you always have one shape on each side. The only shape we haven't covered yet is shape 2. And you can find this by using the root note on the D string. Or just remembering that this is the next shape after shape 1. The anchoring concept can also be used for chords and arpeggios. Let me know in the comments if you want me to go even deeper into anchoring. After 3 comes 4. Here I want to go through some common technique mistakes that are easy to fix. I'll start with a fretting hand. The first mistake is having flat fingers when playing. I've already mentioned this one, but it's so important I just want to say it again. So you don't want to play with flat fingers like this, but instead try to use your fingertips. But don't force it, because sometimes it's going to be really hard to use your fingertips, especially your first finger. The next tip is for when doing bars, like this. So you don't want your finger to this side of the fret. That's just really hard, no matter how hard you press. Instead, you want your finger to be as close to this fret as possible. Very useful. The next mistake is having wrong hand positioning. And there are 2 main ways to position your fretting hand. The first one is thumb behind the neck. A good practice is to have a quite straight thumb and place it around the middle of the neck, not too high and not too low. By having the thumb behind the neck, you make sure you have good support to play efficiently. It will also give your fingers the biggest range. The second one is thumb over the neck. This one is very good for doing bends or getting a powerful vibrato. And it's also very common in blues playing. Even though these are the 2 main positions, your thumb is still going to move a lot when you are playing. And sometimes you'll not be strictly in one of the positions. And surprise, people have different thumbs. So the most important thing is that it feels comfortable to you. Next, let's have a look at our picking hand. When you're picking, you want some angle on your pick, like this. It's not completely straight, but you want some angle around 45 degrees. I also like to angle the pick slightly downwards. It's just because it feels more natural to me. And lastly, you don't want to use your arm a lot. Most of the movements should come from the wrists. But don't overthink this, because you will still get some movement from your fingers and also your arm. And that's totally fine. I'm almost getting out of sparkling water. Not good. Then we have lesson 5. This is why most guitar players never truly understand the guitar. That is because they don't understand the theory behind the major scale. Because the major scale is the foundation of most Western music, let's cover some basics. You might have heard people say stuff like the major seventh or the minor third or something like that. They are referring to something called intervals. Intervals are simply the distance between two notes. Very important. And the notes could either be played at the same time, which we call harmonically, or after each other, which we call melodically. To understand intervals, let's look at a normal C major scale shape. And each of the scale steps have a number. So first note is number 1. Next note is number 2. Third note is number 3. And so on. And this is a good starting point for intervals, because the names are basically the same as those numbers. So let's go through the intervals in a C major scale. And remember that intervals are the distance between two notes. So we're going to look at the distance between all the notes in the C major scale in relation to the note C, the first note of the major scale. So note number 1 is called unison. That simply means that the intervals are the exact same notes. The next note is number 2 in the scale, and it's called the major second. Note number 3 is called the major third. Then we have the perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and the last one is called the octave. And for all the major intervals, there's also a minor version of that interval. So this is a major second. And simply play it 1 fret down, and then we get a minor second. Then we have major third. Take it 1 fret down, and we get a minor third. The third is the interval that decides if a chord is major or minor. So here's a chord with a major third and with a minor third. Right, so next interval we have is a major sixth. 1 fret down, and we get a minor sixth. Then we have the major seventh. Take it down, and we get the minor seventh. When you understand this, music will make so much more sense. For example, now we can also understand the theory behind chords, because chords are just built up by different intervals. There is more to learn about the major scale, but that was a quick introduction. Phew! They've covered so much, so I actually recommend to focus on one thing at a time, and then just come back to the video again later. And since you made it to the end, you are actually a special snowflake. In the next video, I share 2 of my favorite shapes that make guitar 10 times easier.